What would you do if you saw a mother and baby living in a car, walk past, or change their lives forever? This isn't a movie. It's what actually happened when Richard Gere spotted a homeless woman on a New York street. And what he did next left everyone speechless. Richard Gere wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary that Wednesday evening. He had just wrapped up a long shoot for an indie film in downtown Los Angeles, one where he played a disheveled, homeless man. Ironic, considering what was about to unfold. The role had already been stirring something inside him, but he wasn't prepared for the real-life story waiting just a few blocks away. Instead of climbing into the black SUV that usually took him back to his hotel, he waved his driver off and decided to walk. He liked walking after work. It grounded him, especially when filming such heavy material. The city was cooling off, a light breeze moving through the otherwise still evening. Most of the shops were closed, traffic was thinning, and the street lamps bathed the pavement in gold. As he walked past a row of shuttered businesses, a nondescript car caught his eye. It was a silver sedan, battered and aging. Parked crookedly under a flickering streetlight near a 24-hour laundromat, it seemed completely abandoned. Except it wasn't. There was movement inside. At first, he thought it might just be someone resting or on a late-night break. But then he noticed a shape in the front seat, a woman, her head tilted downward as if in exhaustion. In her arms, wrapped tightly in a worn pink blanket, was a baby. Gere slowed down. The scene was stark jarring. He paused mid-step, unsure what to do. A gust of wind rattled a nearby trash bin, and the woman stirred. She noticed him. Their eyes met for a moment. Hers were tired and guarded, but not entirely closed off. Gere offered a small nod, not wanting to alarm her. Still, he could feel the tension in her posture. She straightened slightly, shielding the baby with her arms. He took a couple of cautious steps forward, but maintained distance. "Hey," he said gently. "Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." There was a long pause before she replied. "It's fine. Just please don't call the cops." Her voice was raw, not aggressive, just weary. She'd likely had too many close calls already. "I won't," he said sincerely. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay." She gave a small shrug. "We're alive. That's something." Gere didn't know what to say to that. He wanted to offer help immediately, money, food, shelter, but years in the public had taught him that people often react strangely when they know who he is. So, he introduced himself as just Richard. She gave her name reluctantly. "Emily," she said, "and this little one is Noah." Gere offered a warm smile. "Hi, Noah," he said softly, directing his gaze toward the baby who, miraculously, was sleeping peacefully through all of this. For a few moments, they stood in silence. Gere, a world-famous actor used to scripted dialogue and bright lights, suddenly felt small in the presence of this woman's raw struggle. The props he had worn earlier that day, fake dirt, ripped clothing, felt insulting now. Emily began talking, perhaps because she needed someone to listen, or maybe because she saw something safe in his demeanor. She had lost her job at a call center 6 months ago when the company downsized. With no savings, no family willing to help, and rent rising every month, she had been evicted 2 months later. At first, she'd stayed with a friend, but that arrangement didn't last. Eventually, the car became their shelter. "I try to park in areas where we won't be noticed," she explained. "I don't like the shelters. They're not safe for babies." Gere nodded, saying nothing, letting her lead the conversation. "I have formula," she continued, "but it's running low. Diapers, too. I go to churches and food banks when I can, but it's not always enough." Her voice cracked a little. She quickly looked away, as if ashamed of showing vulnerability. "No one should have to do this alone," Gere said softly. "Especially not with a baby." Emily looked at him then, really looked. There was suspicion, but also a flicker of appreciation. "Most people just look away," she said. "Some get angry, like we're doing something wrong just by being here." "I know," Gere replied. "But they're wrong." The moment was quiet again. Gere's heart felt heavy, a mix of empathy and guilt. He had spent the day pretending to live like this, coached by a director and shielded by a trailer between takes. And here she was, no script, no exit plan. "I have something," he said, reaching into his bag and pulling out a still warm sandwich and bottle of juice he had grabbed after filming. "It's not much, but..." Emily hesitated, then accepted it gratefully. Thank you. Noah can have the juice. It's diluted fruit. Nothing harsh, Gere added. Emily offered a faint smile, one of the first he'd seen. It was the kind of smile that didn't have the energy to last long, but was genuine while it lasted. I'll come by tomorrow, same time, Gere said before leaving. If that's okay. Emily looked uncertain. Why? He hesitated. Because I want to help. And because I think you could use a friend. She didn't respond right away, but finally gave a small nod. Okay, tomorrow. That night, Gere couldn't sleep. He lay awake in his hotel bed, surrounded by comfort that suddenly felt hollow. He thought about Emily, about baby Noah, about the quiet strength in her voice, the unspoken fear in her eyes. He thought about how many people lived like this, hidden in plain sight, struggling silently. The image of her holding her baby in the front seat of that old car played on loop in his mind. It was haunting, unshakable. The next morning, while sipping his coffee and reviewing lines for the next scene, Gere opened his laptop and began making calls. Not to his agent, not to the director, but to a network of outreach organizations, emergency shelters, women's aid centers, and nonprofits in the LA area. He knew he had the resources to make a difference. But more importantly, he now had a reason. Richard Gere returned to the same street the next evening, just as the sun was setting, the city around him buzzing in contrast to the quiet tension of the spot where Emily and her baby lived. True to her word, she was there, parked in the same spot, the baby in her lap, a makeshift curtain of towels shielding the back seat from view. She didn't seem surprised to see him, but there was a subtle shift in her expression, a tiny loosening of the tension in her brow, the kind that signaled cautious hope. Hey, Gere said as he approached, holding a paper bag. I brought some things. She blinked, hesitant, as he offered the bag through the open window. Inside were fresh sandwiches, baby wipes, formula, diapers, and a soft blanket. I wasn't sure what you had or needed, so I guessed. Emily looked at him long and hard, her eyes softening just slightly. Thank you, she said quietly. Gere crouched beside the car, resting his arm on the edge of the doorframe. I meant what I said yesterday, he continued. I want to help. I've been making some calls. There's a women's center about 15 minutes from here, run by a group I trust. It's quiet, secure, and they take in mothers and children. Private rooms. No questions asked. Emily's expression flickered, temptation and fear battling across her face. I've been to places like that, she muttered. Some aren't safe. They say one thing and do another. This one's different, Gere said gently. I talked to someone who works there full-time. She said they had an opening as of this morning. You and Noah wouldn't be turned away. Still, she didn't respond. The weight of mistrust, built brick by brick through disappointment and desperation, wasn't something one generous offer could knock down. So he took another route. I won't push you, he said. But if you'd be okay with it, I'd like to come by every night. Bring you supplies. Just be here. Emily studied him like someone trying to determine whether a bridge would collapse if they stepped on it. After a few moments, she gave a slight nod. Okay, but no police. No cameras. I've had enough people try to rescue me for a story. No cameras, Gere promised. Just me. Over the next several days, Gere kept returning. Every evening, rain or shine, he appeared with fresh food, clean clothes, and diapers. He never showed up empty-handed and never showed up with expectations. Sometimes they talked. Other times, they sat in silence as the baby slept. He never pushed her to leave the car. Instead, he focused on building trust, laying one honest moment on top of another until a fragile bond began to take shape. On the fourth night, Gere brought a mobile phone, prepaid with 3 months of service. For emergencies, he said, or if you just need to talk to someone. Emily held the phone with shaking hands. You're doing too much, she whispered. He shook his head. Not enough. Not yet. Still, she didn't ask who he really was. Perhaps she sensed he wanted anonymity. Or maybe she just didn't care. To her, he was Richard, the kind man with warm eyes who showed up when no one else did. But behind the scenes, Gere's quiet efforts were becoming more involved. He contacted the Women's Center again and donated enough funds to open 2 more rooms, naming them temporary housing scholarships. No one was told the donation came from him. He also arranged for a pediatrician from a nearby clinic to visit the center once a week, ensuring any mothers who came through received medical support for their children. He began reaching out to a few trusted colleagues, quietly, carefully, seeking opportunities that might help Emily once she was ready. He spoke to legal advocates who helped undocumented women obtain shelter, people who specialized in housing transition support, and even a therapist who specialized in postpartum mental health. Still, none of this was pushed on Emily. That next week, something changed. Emily opened up more. She told him how she used to work nights at a diner and go to school during the day, how she'd once dreamed of becoming a social worker, how the pregnancy had been unplanned and the father had vanished as soon as he learned about it. She had been on her own since then. She told him how it felt to be invisible. People think we're lazy, she said bitterly. Like I want to live this way. But I had plans. I had everything figured out. One layoff, one medical bill, one landlord who didn't want to wait, and it all unraveled. Gere listened without interrupting, his heart growing heavier with every word. That night, he left her with a bag full of new clothes for Noah, including a tiny onesie with stars on it. I saw it and thought of him, he said, handing it over. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she took it. He doesn't have anything this nice. He does now, Gere said, offering a smile. By the end of the second week, something shifted again. Emily asked him, shyly, do you think I could maybe meet someone from that women's center? Just to talk. Gere tried to mask his relief. Absolutely. I can arrange that tomorrow. The next day, he returned with a woman named Carla, one of the directors of the shelter. She was gentle, kind, and direct, exactly the kind of person Emily could trust. They talked for almost an hour while Gere sat nearby, quietly watching Noah gurgle and grip his finger. Afterward, Emily seemed thoughtful. They said I could come just for a night, she murmured. No pressure. He nodded. You'll have a private room, clean sheets, a warm crib for Noah. The next night, the car was gone. For a moment, Gere feared the worst. Had she changed her mind? Had someone else found her? But then he got a text. We're here. The bed is soft. Noah fell asleep smiling. Thank you. He stared at the screen for a long time, the corners of his mouth lifting in a quiet, private smile. For the next few weeks, Gere continued visiting, not at the car anymore, but at the shelter. Emily began to glow again, like a plant rediscovering sunlight. She was still cautious, but less guarded. She began attending workshops the center offered, basic finances, early childhood care, and eventually job readiness programs. Gere helped quietly from behind the scenes, always careful not to overshadow her independence. He understood that what she needed was opportunity, not rescue. He covered a few months of rent for a modest apartment that the center found for her, again anonymously. When he handed her the key, she broke down in tears. I don't deserve this, she whispered. You deserve peace, he said, and your son deserves a future. Eventually, the center helped Emily find part-time work at a nearby daycare, one that welcomed young children. Noah came with her every day. The staff adored her. Her confidence grew. Still, she didn't know who Richard really was. But word was starting to spread within the shelter. Rumors of a quiet benefactor, of a man who wore old jeans and brought baby blankets. Someone recognized him once and whispered his name to a staffer. The truth began to surface. One afternoon, as Gere sat on a bench near the shelter garden waiting for Emily to finish a meeting, she approached with Noah in her arms. I Googled you, she said simply. Gere looked up a little sheepish. I figured you would eventually. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to trust me as a person, not a headline. Emily sat beside him and let Noah rest against her chest. I didn't want to believe it at first, but then I thought, of course it's you. Only someone used to pretending would understand what it's like to be invisible. Gere chuckled softly. Maybe. She reached into her pocket and handed him a small folded note. He opened it. Inside was a drawing, a stick figure family, hers, Noah's, and a third figure labeled Richard. Above them was a sun and a single word. Hope. He swallowed hard. I don't know how to repay you, she said. You already have, he replied. Weeks turned into months, and Emily's transformation was remarkable. The thin, hollow-eyed woman Richard had first met in a dimly lit car had evolved into someone stronger, more radiant. She stood straighter now, smiled more often, even laughed, a sound that had been foreign to her lips for nearly a year. Noah was thriving, too. His cheeks were fuller, his giggles louder, and he had started babbling out sounds that made every adult around him melt. He especially lit up when Richard came by. The moment he entered the room, the baby would squeal and reach for him like an old friend. The bond between the three had deepened, though neither Richard nor Emily could truly explain it. It wasn't romantic, but it was personal, foundational, as if some invisible thread had been woven between their lives the moment their paths crossed. Emily had finally moved into a small, cozy one-bedroom apartment not far from the shelter. It wasn't much, just a kitchenette, a narrow bathroom, and enough space for a crib and a fold-out couch. But to her, it was a palace. Her name was on the lease. She paid rent, on time, with the money she earned from her new job at the daycare. One Saturday morning, she invited Richard over for tea. She had been hesitant at first, worried it would feel like charity, but he accepted her invitation graciously. When he stepped through the door, she had set up a small tray with mugs and lemon biscuits from the discount store. "I'm not much of a cook yet," she said, laughing nervously, "but I figured tea doesn't burn." Richard smiled and took a sip. "Perfect temperature," he said. They talked for over an hour. She told him about her job, her coworkers, and how she was working toward her GED. She mentioned wanting to study online part-time. Social work was still in her heart, and now it felt within reach. "You inspired me," she said. "You saw me when I didn't want to be seen." Richard looked down at his cup, emotions stirring. "You inspired yourself, Emily. I just happened to be nearby when you decided to fight." As their friendship grew, word about Emily's story began to spread, though she hadn't shared much publicly. But someone at the shelter had mentioned her progress during a board meeting, and one of the center's donors had written a blog post about an anonymous benefactor helping turn lives around. A journalist caught wind and began asking questions. Eventually, the truth came out. The internet exploded. Richard Gere quietly helps homeless mother and baby off the streets. Not just a role. Gere lives his character's journey in real life. Hollywood stars' secret acts of kindness revealed. At first, Emily panicked. She called Richard the moment the story broke, fear thick in her voice. "They know. People are posting pictures of us from outside the shelter." Reporters showed up near the daycare. "I don't want this." "I know," he said gently, "and I'm so sorry." He made a public statement the next day. He confirmed that he had helped a young mother, but refused to provide her name or location. He asked the media for privacy, for her son, and emphasized that the story wasn't about celebrity, but about awareness. "We walk past people every day who are in crisis," he said at a press conference. "What they need isn't spectacle. It's dignity, safety, a second chance." Emily watched the clip online with tears in her eyes. Despite his efforts, the attention didn't disappear completely. Offers came in, talk shows, documentary producers, even a book deal proposal, but Emily turned them all down. She wasn't ready to tell her story that way. She didn't want Noah to grow up with cameras in his face. Still, the momentum led to something unexpected. Donations poured into the shelter that had taken her in. Within 3 weeks, they raised enough money to expand their services, open 3 new rooms, and hire 2 more full-time staff members. Emily's story, even unnamed, had ignited something powerful in others. The director of the shelter approached her one afternoon. "We'd like to offer you a position. Full-time. Casework. You'd be working with new mothers, helping them navigate housing and childcare." Emily was stunned. "I'm not certified. You've lived it, and we'll help you get trained." She accepted the job 2 days later. It felt like a circle had closed. Not an end, but a continuation. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was part of a system of healing. When she told Richard, he beamed. "Told you," he said. "You've got that light in you." Not long after, on a quiet Sunday morning, Emily invited him to a small ceremony at the shelter. The director had insisted on acknowledging the anonymous donation that had made so many changes possible. Richard had planned to slip in the back, avoid attention, But Emily had other plans. When it was her turn to speak, she stood nervously at the podium, Noah bouncing on her hip. "I wasn't going to talk," she began, "because I'm not used to this kind of thing. But someone once told me that stories matter. Not because they're dramatic, but because they can save someone else. And mine, well, it started in a car parked outside a laundromat." The room was silent. I was lost, scared, and convinced that no one cared. Then someone showed up, not with judgment, not with a camera, just with a warm drink and kindness. She looked out at the audience, eyes locking on Richard. He never told me who he really was. Not until much later. And even then, he asked for nothing. I call him a friend now. But for a while, he was my lifeline. Her voice cracked, and she paused to kiss Noah's cheek. "Because of him, my son gets to grow up in a real home. Because of him, I get to help others the way I was helped. And because of him, I finally believe in good people again." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Afterward, Richard approached her quietly. "You didn't have to say all that." She shrugged. "I wanted to. People need to know what it looks like when someone chooses to see instead of look away." The two stood outside the shelter afterward, watching kids play in the courtyard. Spring had started to bloom in the trees, and a breeze lifted the scent of new flowers into the air. "So," Emily said, nudging him, "still think you're just an actor?" Richard chuckled. "Maybe just a lucky man who took the right walk at the right time." They sat together for a long time, saying little. There wasn't much more that needed to be said. Their story wasn't built on grand speeches or sweeping gestures. It was built on presence, on showing up, again and again. Weeks later, a photo went viral. Richard Gere sitting cross-legged on the floor of a daycare, Noah asleep in his lap, Emily beside him reading from a children's book. The caption read, "Compassion isn't performance. It's persistence." In a world often numbed by cynicism, their story reminded people of the quiet power of choosing to care. Not just once, but over and over again. And for Emily and Noah, life moved forward. Not perfect, but peaceful. And Richard? He still visited every Sunday. With snacks, with laughter, and always with the same humble heart that had stopped beside a broken-down car one evening and chosen, without fanfare, to do something. Something that would change 3 lives forever.